I built and sold a $1.2 million agency last year at the age of 24, but it didn't always look that way. Just a few years ago, I actually ended up losing my house with my mom, and I would watch her skip meals just so I could eat. And on top of that, I almost took my life. So here's how I turned it all around. But first, just to give you a little bit of backstory, way back when I was about 14, 15, I was going through a ton of depression from undealt with trauma. And that was the point that I almost took my life. Luckily, my mom was there. She supported me through everything, but I never really had much going for me. I didn't have a strong financial background. We didn't grow up with money, and I didn't even know what that looked like. I also wasn't particularly smart in school. I didn't do well grades-wise. I wasn't doing well in tests, and there was no interest for me really in the work that I was doing at school. So I kind of knew that I wasn't really set out to go to university. It wasn't interesting to me. But what I did feel a strong hunger towards was trying to find a way to make money online. I kept seeing it, and with the given situation that we were at that was worsening every single month and every single year, I knew that I needed to do something. But I was young, I was also female and South African, so it seemed like everything was against me, and I'd never seen someone that looked or sounded like me do it before. So I just assumed that it wasn't possible. So I kind of put it on the back burner. But as time went on, our financial situation worsened to the point that some days I wouldn't even be able to go to school because we didn't have enough petrol. So that put this strong bug inside of me that I knew I wasn't willing to settle for less. And I started to, around the age of 17, find some side hustles. I was selling video games that we weren't using anymore on Facebook Marketplace. I tried to start an art business where I sold portraits of people that just didn't work out. And I started to do social media management. That was the first time that I saw a little bit of traction from something. And it was the first time that I actually made $1 online, which was the biggest turning point for me. I knew that I was onto something at that point, but I couldn't focus on it full time because I had so much work from school to do, and I also was struggling to get good marks, so I had to focus in on that. So I put that on the back burner, and as time went on, again, things just got worse and worse, and I couldn't see a way out of it. I also found myself not being sure whether this was even the path for me because, again, it's not something I'd ever witnessed in my immediate surroundings before. So I even remember around the age of 17 or 18 is where I started to really take it seriously, and I started to rewire my brain. I knew that because I didn't know what money looked like, I needed to train myself into believing that it was possible. And I would do simple things like going to a Rolex store and asking them to try on a watch, even though I knew I couldn't afford it and probably wouldn't ever be able to. I still went, I tried it on, I tried to get myself comfortable around fancier places or wealthier arenas. And that way, it was kind of teaching me that it wasn't that uncomfortable after all, and I started to associate myself with that. I would go to fancy places for a cup of coffee. Even though I was struggling to pay for it, I still put myself in those situations. Then as high school ended, we actually ended up losing our house and having to move in with my uncle, to the point that I was sharing a bed with my mom for about 6 months. And it was at this point that I realized I needed to make a big change in my life. I needed to take what I already knew. I needed to find a way to monetize that and turn it into an income. And that's exactly what I did. I literally isolated myself for 6 months on end without seeing friends, without going out. Luckily, a lot of them were overseas for gap years. I just sat down and I worked night and day, every single day on this one side hustle, which was social media management at the time. And I started to see a little bit more traction. But the issue was that I was working 16-hour days and I was greatly underpaid. I was only charging $80 for a full service social media plan where I would post every single day. I would do the copy for that, keeping in mind that there was no ChatGPT at the time. And I would post for them, I would grow their followers, I would do absolutely everything, only for $80. I was earning way less than minimum wage, but it still felt so good because I saw that coming from online, and I knew that if I could make $1, I could probably make 10. If I could make 10, I could make 100, and so on. I knew that I could 10x whatever I was doing with more output. So I just started small. I started saving every little bit that I was making. And while I was saving, luckily COVID ended up hitting at around 2020. So I was forced to just sit down and work on my business. But it still didn't change the fact that I wasn't seeing traction. I didn't know what my next step was. I didn't know what the next move was, especially because I knew I wasn't earning enough for the amount that I was putting in. So I decided to take a chance. I decided to raise my prices without changing the service offering. And surprisingly, I got way more interest, and the perception of my value was so much higher. And there's a huge lesson in that for anyone watching. Whatever you think you're doing, as soon as you raise your price, people are going to perceive it as more valuable. Doesn't mean you have to change exactly what you're doing. It just means their respect for you is going to increase. And that is the biggest positioning I took just as a chance. So I ended up working a lot more, but I was actually making more as well. I would wake up at 3 a.m. and I would take sales calls. And then eventually I closed my first high ticket client at $1,250 per month. And that's when I knew that I was onto something. It was at that moment that I realized that I could focus in on this. I could make it real. So I looked at everything that worked. What worked with them is I was focused on a specific niche. I was focused on a specific offering, and I was putting in the effort that actually scaled the business. At that time, it was the outreach that I was doing, which was cold emailing. So that's all I did every single day. I targeted people in this specific niche and only this offer. I was done offering multiple different things, and I stuck to that price range. And before I knew it, within 6 months, I scaled to $10,000 per month, which was life-changing money for me. And to be honest, then nothing has made me feel richer to this day than I did when I was making $10,000. It was the first time that I was able to pay my mom some money. It was the first time I was able to go out without thinking about what I was spending. And being in South Africa, that currency exchange is crazy. No one at the age of 21 or 22 is making that kind of money. And although this was the most celebratory time of my life, I also knew that I could push it higher. I'd reached a threshold and I knew that I needed to find a way to scale. So I re-looked at everything. And to be honest, the social media management wasn't scalable. It was a lot of output, and it was very difficult to close consistent clients and keep them because it was hard to prove that they were getting value out of it. So instead, I switched the model. I focused not on changing the niche or changing multiple different things. I focused on changing one variable. And that's a big mistake so many people make, is they focus on changing so many different things and they end up starting from scratch. I kept focusing on the one thing that I'd been working on since I was 17, but I just changed the service offering. So I kept the same niche, and I decided to rebrand the entire company to CannaScale. And what we did is we did email marketing for hemp brands specifically. So we were super niche down. We were focused on one service offering, which simplified the whole process because it was plug and play. And now we could become experts. And that's exactly what happened. Very quickly, we scaled to over $30,000 per month, with about 60 to 70% of that being profit. And it was at that point that I was able to travel the world. I was able to take my mom traveling for the first time in her life, fly her business. I was going out, I was renting villas for weekends with my friends. I was flying 6 or 7 of them down to the city that I live in. I had so much more freedom, and I was actually working less because I finally started to put systems and people in place to scale the offer. And that's exactly what it was all about to begin with. It's not about working 16-hour days, although there's a time and place for that. It's about enabling systems to do that for you. It's about putting people in place to do it for you, and you steer the ship, but you shouldn't be working relentless hours and seeing nothing in return. You should have time freedom, you should have location freedom, and that's exactly why I decided on this business model and why I focused in on it, because I could tell that I didn't have to spend tons of time once I had a working system in place. That's why it's my favorite business model. I've tried everything. I've tried drop shipping. I've tried different business models. I've tried AI. I've tried everything. And at the end of the day, this is the simplest one, especially for someone with no money. And that's exactly why I coach other women on exactly how to build this business model. Sometimes all you need is a blueprint. I spent about 7 years making mistakes and finally got to the point of selling my company, but it didn't come easily. I made so many mistakes. I spent way too many hours working on things that didn't matter. And I especially lost so much potential revenue because I wasn't focusing where I should have. All it took was a step-by-step process that you can follow blindly, and that's it. That's exactly why I coach women like you who are watching this video that want to change their life. They want location freedom. They want to maybe change their family's lives as well. And they don't want to wait around for a man to do that for them. They want to be independent and they want to make that success for themselves. That's exactly where I was. So that sounds like you. Go down below the video. There'll be a link in the description. It's not free and it's not cheap, but I offer mentorship to women that want to change their lives and build an agency business or scale their coaching offer. So with that being said, that is exactly how I got to the point of selling my agency and scaling it to the point that I did. Hopefully it helps, and I hope that you will change your family's lives the way that I did. Well, with that being said, I wish you the best. I'll see you in the next.